All right, we're going to go ahead and get started now. Thank you all for joining us today for our virtual Lunch and Learn webinar on the Vote 16 project. My name is Sarai Ramos. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy for the Latino Action Network Foundation. And I'm excited to see you all here joining us today to talk about this historic opportunity for students and 16 and 17-year-olds in Newark. And them being able to vote in the upcoming school board elections. And so before we get started, I did want to acknowledge and thank our guest speaker today, Asata Man, who is a senior community organizer at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. They are dedicated to advocating for civic engagement, youth empowerment, and social justice. And so I'm excited to hear more from them today about the Vote 16 project. And so, Asata, you can go ahead and take the mic.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And good afternoon, everyone. Really great to be here with you today. I can't see you, but I know you're there. I see you in the attendee list. So thank you so much for joining, especially during your lunch hour. Hope you have something good to munch on. Definitely want to, thank Sarai and the whole Latino Action Network Foundation team for having me on today, but also for all the very important work that they do across our state, supporting Latino communities and others. So, as Sarai mentioned today, I am really excited to talk a little bit about the Vote 16 initiative. A little bit about what's going on across the state, but also, to drill down into what's happening here in the city of Newark, and hopefully be able to share some information with you about how you can support this, how you can support young people, and just answer any questions you have. So if you give me one moment, I'm going to share some slides that I have today. Okay.
And also, please feel free to share or send in any questions as they come up. We will address them after the presentation.
Okay, great. So hopefully y'all can see this. Okay, so as it was mentioned, my name is Asada Man, and I'm a senior community organizer at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. I've been doing organizing and advocacy for a few years now. Really got active at Rutgers, Newark as a college student, but really my work and my focus has been around trying to build power and leadership in communities of color, and advocating for racial and social justice policies and changes. And a lot of that has focused on working with young people. I'm not that old myself, so definitely that has been a lot of that work has been around mobilizing my peers and others in the community. And so a little bit about the Institute. We're a nonprofit organization. We see ourselves as we're a policy and advocacy organization. Sometimes we call ourselves a policy think and do tank, because really, we try to listen to what communities need, primarily communities of color, Black and Brown, and then work with them, work alongside them to advocate for policies and initiatives that work to repair the harm of structural racism. And so we really do our work in three main areas. We have three pillars of work that includes democracy and justice. That's a lot of our voting rights work, where we're trying to remove obstacles to the obstacles to the ballot and civic engagement, while also making the process more accessible, right? And making sure that more folks have a seat at the table and a true voice in our democracy. But we're also working on criminal justice reform, and economic justice, where we're trying to close the racial wealth gap. Many people don't know this, but New Jersey has one of the largest wealth gaps in the nation, where the average Black and Latino family have about $17,000 or $20,000 of wealth, compared to the average white family that has about $300,000. So we're looking at a $300,000 wealth gap in the state. And that is not the focus of my presentation today, but I always have to share that with folks whenever I have the opportunity. What I will be covering today and focusing on is number one, just giving you a little bit of background information around the Vote 16 movement. Hopefully you're familiar, you've heard about it a little bit before, but if not, I'll be providing some info. And then, as I mentioned, we're gonna dive into Newark, what's going on here, some of our initiatives, um, some of the things we're doing with partners, and how you can support. And of course, we'll wrap up with a Q&A, but feel free to put questions in the chat anytime, and I'll try to address those as we go through. So, how did we get here to the point where in New Jersey we do have one municipality with youth voting, and that's the city of Newark. It's the first city in New Jersey, and of course our largest city to pass an ordinance to lower the voting age. Hopefully, it's not the last though. But what is Vote 16? It really is, just as the name implies, it's pretty straightforward. It's an initiative to lower the voting age to at least 16 years old. And there are proposals to do this pretty much every level of government, from federal elections down. But here in New Jersey, our efforts have really focused on school board and local elections. For various reasons. One of the major reasons being that that is where people, feel the most impact, most immediate, usually most profound impact of the actions of their local government, right? That's where they have the most stake and should obviously have a voice and say in the decisions that happen there. And so, especially with the school board, when we're talking about students who are spending majority of their days there, right? They're directly impacted by the school board decisions, and really should have a voice in shaping their education. But thinking about why Vote 16, why we this is something we're working on. There's really a number of reasons. One of the major reasons is that, as I mentioned in my intro, the institute, we're very much focused on trying to build power in communities of color, and and really open up our democracy to be more reflective, more multiracial, and just truly open and accessible for people in communities that historically have not had a voice, have not had a say in our democratic process. And so for us, one of the major proponents of this initiative is that it will strengthen our democracy, right? By bringing, a whole generation of new voices to the table, which we think is really important, especially at a time like this, right? Where we're seeing attempts from, pretty much everywhere across the country, DC, but sometimes even more locally, attempts to, hamper democratic rights, limit transparency, pull back civic rights, right? And so, if there was ever a time to bring a new influx of voices and ideas to the table, this is certainly one of them. And at the institute, we really firmly believe that change happens from the ground up. And so we think it's amazing. It's an amazing opportunity for young people to be able to be part of the change at their most, the most local level, right? In their schools, in their cities. But going further than that, what we've seen, what research and studies show in other places that have lowered the voting age, because this is not necessarily a new idea, a new movement, right? There are other places who have done this before. And what they found is that when they lower the voting age, you know, human beings are really creatures of habit, right? And so if you're able to start voting younger, or sooner, and have the opportunity to explore what voting is like at an earlier age, ideally while you're still in school, it's been shown that you will go on to continue those habits, right? Continue to be civically engaged. Young people who are given the opportunity to register and vote are shown as outpacing, above 18-year-old adults when it comes to voter participation, right? So voting at even higher numbers than adults when given the opportunity. Right. And so, we know that our democracy, our society works best when everybody has a seat at the table, everybody has the equal opportunity to participate. And in New Jersey, we have elections every single year, multiple elections every single year, up and down the ballot. And unfortunately, one of the realities is that many of those elections have very low turnout, right? I'll tell, and especially around our school board elections, in places that have off cycle elections, right? So looking at April school board elections instead of being on the November ballot, they have really low turnout. We're talking about, as an example, the city of Newark last year in their school board election, they only had about a 3% voter turnout, right? And so there's, again, lots of reasons for why people may not be participating in these elections, least of which is that they don't even know that they're going on. But it doesn't help that, you're once you graduate high school, you're thrown out into the real world, and you have all these different responsibilities coming at you. And then, you've never really had civic education or the opportunity to learn about what your government does and voting. And so the reality is many people don't pick that up unless they're given the opportunity to practice while they're still in school, right? And it just makes sense as well to 16 kind of makes sense as an age because this is already a time of great transition and new experiences for young people, right? Many of them have jobs, right? Many of them are working and paying taxes. And so that's a whole other component of it. But many are getting their driver's licenses and just exploring all these new experiences. And so 16 just seems like a perfect time to be doing this. um Many of our young people are already very socially active, civically engaged. They're involved in politics, whether it's from but whether it's around climate change, racial justice, um any number of things, education. There are just so many issues that young people are on the front lines of, and have a stake in our future, but they're not given the opportunity then to elect candidates that express, represent their will or their values, right? And so, we just think that this is one of the next frontiers and opening up our democracy and making it much more reflective, much stronger, and really just like the democracy that um, we all aspire to have. So as I mentioned, this, for many people, sometimes they hear this idea of younger people voting, 16 and 17-year-olds, and they think that it's a little crazy sometimes. They think it's a little radical, but it really isn't. Again, this is not a new initiative by any means. There are actually already many countries. There's several countries around the world who allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote with really great outcomes, really great benefits, as I mentioned. But there's also several states and municipalities in the U.S. that allow people under the age of 18 to vote. Excuse me. Of course, I think some of us are already familiar with the idea of allowing 17-year-olds who will be 18 by the time of a general election to vote in a primary. New Jersey just passed a law, I think it was last year or the year before, doesn't go into effect until 2026, called the New Voter Empowerment Act. So that's already a step that the state has taken to allow more youth participation in our election. But there's also municipalities, right? Newark is the second largest city in the U.S. to pass an ordinance lowering the voting age, but in Oakland, California, that's the first largest municipality, most similarly situated to the city of Newark, to pass an ordinance, right? So this is by no means a new idea. In fact, it's not even, and I have a few more images here that show municipalities that allow, or excuse me, states that allow for lowering the voting age for their municipal and school board elections, and it also shows the years that they've passed these ordinances, right? So we can see, going back as far as 2013, Maryland was taking a step in this direction, and Newark being the newest city in 2024 to also do this. But even in New Jersey, this movement is not exactly new. For the last few years, there actually have been young people around the state who have been trying to organize and advocate for lowering the voting age. I definitely want to give major kudos and just gratitude, everything to Vote 16 New Jersey. They're an organization, a youth-led, youth-run organization. They were started, I believe, in 2015 or 2016, and they've really been leading the fight here, right? They've been leading the movement, building the movement here in New Jersey, by organizing high school students in different towns across the state to, meet with their city council members, testify at council meetings, go to school board meetings, all of the things that activists and organizers do in support of this initiative. And so, they really have been laying the groundwork for this movement. And it really was in 2023 that the Institute, as well as some other organizations like the NAACP, connected with Vote 16 NJ to help them with this campaign. They previously were trying to have an amendment to the Constitution be the way that they get this done, and for a couple reasons that is very difficult to have happen. So the Institute was able to connect with them and just explore other avenues for making this work. And so through our legal research, what we found is that municipalities actually have the authority to legislate on certain election matters that the state government, the state legislature hasn't touched. And lowering the voting age is actually one of the things that they can do. So, we took that and we basically ran with it. And we formed a new statewide coalition and campaign called Vote 16, not to be confused with Vote 16 New Jersey, the organization. And so in kind of taking this idea that municipalities have the authority, they have the right to pass ordinances around certain local elections initiatives, the Institute published a policy brief. You can see an image here. It's called Let Us Vote: Why 16 and 17-year-olds should be allowed to vote in local elections and beyond. And you can find this on our website. It's a good read. It's a short read. It's not very long for a policy brief as some of these often are, but it's very salient, right? And spelling out all the reasons why young people should have a seat at the table, especially in their local elections. And it spelled out just kind of like why this is something that local governments have the power to do. And so that was one of the like major campaign milestones that we had. That brief came out in August 2023. And since then, we've been, across the state recruiting and organizing young people and different organizations to be part of this coalition. We've done, many public events, webinars, all those sorts of things. And last year in October 2024, we actually held the first statewide Vote 16 Youth Summit, where we had around 100 or so young people come to the city of Newark on a October cold Saturday, really just to be in community with one another, to learn about the movement and participate in workshops and trainings where they can get the hands-on skills and knowledge they need to be, activists and organizers and to run local campaigns in their municipalities. Because again, we really, we don't see Newark as being the last city to do this, really just the first step. And there's actually interest in many other municipalities around the state, both from young people in the community there, but from elected officials, right? Council members, school board members, mayors who are also interested in supporting this. And so, the momentum's building. That's something we're really excited about. Of course, as I laid it out, a lot of our strategy and focus has been around a municipal approach, right? Trying to work with and advocate for local town councils to pass an ordinance, but there also is a state level approach. And there's actually a bill that's been introduced in the state legislature. It's sponsored primarily by Senator Raj Mukherjee. And this bill, if it's passed, it would actually lower the voting age for all school board elections across the state. So every municipality that has a school board, or every school district, um, would have to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote. So that's something we are major supporters of, the whole coalition is, and that we are actively advocating for. Governor Murphy is a very vocal champion and supporter of this issue and this initiative. He's, called for the bill to be sent to him, and he would sign it. This is something that we are hopeful, if not this year, over the next few years, that there will be more gains made around. And so that brings me to advocacy in Newark. So the ordinance that was passed by the city council there, it was introduced, I believe, in late December 2023, around there, and it was passed unanimously in January of 2024. And of course, that did not just happen. It took a lot of support from members of the community, from young people themselves who wanted to see this happen. It took them writing emails, letters, meeting with the council members, and of course going in person to testify in support of this ordinance to get it passed. And so I'm gonna just take one quick moment. Hopefully this works. This isn't at the city council meeting, but this is at the youth summit, where one of the young people who, has been really like the star advocate, star faces of this work in Newark, her name is Brianna. She talked a little bit about why this is important to her and why she wants to vote, why she thinks 16-year-olds should vote. Actually, I think I may have to give me 1 second to share with my audio. Just learned about this. Okay, let's try it again.
We should be able to vote in school board elections because it impacts our school, our education, as to what decisions go out. So we wanted to have a say in what was going out and what was being said. So we decided to testify to ensure that our voices were heard.
What are some of the issues?
Some of the issues were, let's say, some AP classes weren't offered in other schools. We wanted it to be offered in many schools. I spoke to some of my peers from other schools, and the AP classes that I would have in my school weren't offered at their school. So maybe equity in education for all.
Yeah, so just in Brianna's own words, why this is important to her, why she testified, why she stepped up. There are many other young people that we're working with in the city who, feel the same way. There are other issues that they mentioned, around infrastructure of the schools, their curriculum, things that they're being taught, even down to the menus and the food that they're given in school, right? So young people get it. They have voices, they have opinions, and really this is just about giving them that actual political power to, have a say in some of those decisions being made. Okay, so now I want to drill down into Newark and just talk about what the ordinance actually said and what it does. It's honestly very straightforward. It as I mentioned, it lowers the voting age to 16 years old. So there's about 7,000, or a little less than that, 6,000 16 and 17-year-olds in the city of Newark. Most of them, Black, Brown, Latino young people. And so it enfranchises them to vote. But it only applies to school board elections, right? There's some confusion, I know, going around on whether this also would apply to municipal elections or anything else, but this only applies to the school board election and any ballot questions that sometimes accompany the school board. Sometimes there's referendums. And then, I wanted to share a little info about the school board election itself and kind of the process of implementing the ordinance. As I said, it was passed in January of 2024. We're obviously in 2025 now. It really just was not possible. The infrastructure wasn't there and put in place yet for young people to be able to vote in that most immediate election in 2024. So this is going to be on April 15th. 2025, this will be the first election that they're able to exercise these new voting rights. And so in terms of implementation, it took a little while. It took some collaboration with the state division of elections, all the county election offices, the city clerk, to make sure that all the pieces were in place so that this election was ran successfully, that young people would have everything that they actually need. And so we were really excited that voter registration was able to officially begin for 16 and 17-year-olds this past February 1st, Saturday, February 1st. And so the state actually created a specific voter registration form for this election. It's a new youth voter registration form. We can make that available and share it with anybody. But we were very excited to see this because it took a lot of work and advocacy to get them to that point. But now 16 and 17-year-olds do have the right to vote. They are starting to do so. I'll share a little bit more about this in a few minutes, but the Institute partnered with many organizations on February 1st to have a kickoff town hall so that we could, make sure people know about this, that they had all the info they need about the process and the deadline, and they were actually able to start registering to vote on site. And so there were about 15 or 20, I think, young people who took that step for the first time and registered to vote. But now, now that we're underway, the deadline for registering to vote is always 21 days before an election. And so for this election, that's going to be on Tuesday, March 25th. And there's also a number of other key election dates that folks working with young people, empowering them, supporting them should know about. Voters themselves should know about. I'm not going to go through all of these one by one, but most of this is around the different deadlines for applying and submitting a vote by mail deadline if you choose to do so. There are two ways to vote, so folks can still vote in person. Young people will vote at the same polling sites as, above 18-year-old adults. They also have the same ability to request a vote by mail ballot. So, the Institute, we've been putting together a number of resources so that young people, again, know about their new voting rights, and that then they have all the information they need to exercise that. And so I know there's a lot of questions, especially for new voters, and we've compiled a list of these frequently asked questions and answers to them. They're actually available on our website. So you can visit this link, njisj.org/vote16Newark. We actually have a bunch of information, a bunch of resources on this site. This is really like a one-stop shop for this election. So I highly recommend you checking it out. But one of the things you'll find on there is this list of FAQs, right? And so this is just some of the categories of questions that we, see come up often and that we try to answer. So hopefully this will be helpful to you, right? I'm sure you'll have conversations, you'll get questions on, what is this, and why should I vote? Why should I even care about this? Is it important? And just any number of challenges that people might face when trying to vote. And so we have some info there for you. In terms of working with young people and empowering them to be ready to vote, but then also to be long-term civically engaged, right? I think we're not only interested in seeing them go to the polls on April 15th, but then, continuing to be involved with their school board, right? Go to school board meetings, participate in other elections on the ballot, participate in organizations and in their community and all the different types of things. And so we really have three main phases of the work that we're doing here in Newark, or three main components, I should say. The first is around voter registration, right? Of course, we want to make sure that every eligible voter is able to register in time. As I said, there's about 6,000 or so young 16 and 17-year-olds in Newark. They're not all eligible to vote, but a good number, a good percentage of them, we believe they are eligible. There's certain things that we don't have information around. That's not easily accessible for obvious reasons, things around citizenship status or incarceration status, that we're not able to get an exact number of how many eligible voters there are, but we know that number is somewhere around 5,000 to 6,000, right? And so we are having a really robust voter registration effort where we're partnering with lots of different organizations like Latino Action Network, but also the school district, right, itself in the city. The school district, the superintendent of Newark has announced that they are having, I think, weekly registration drives in each of the high schools. And they're doing that up until about March 20th before the registration deadline. But we're also doing a few initiatives outside the schools to complement that. But the second big piece of this is around voter education, right? Just people obviously need to know that this election is going on, but we also want young people to know what they're voting for and the significance of the school board. What does the school board do, right? What are the responsibilities? What are their limitations? Who in the full educational ecosystem is responsible for, whatever issue you're facing with, who's a decision maker. We want them to also have that added context and really what is civic education, right? And then the final piece of this is around voter mobilization. And get out the vote, right? Making sure that once people are registered to vote, they understand what's on the ballot, they know the candidates, the issues, that they actually have a plan to get to the polls and vote, right? Whether that's in person or vote by mail. And I'm sorry my images aren't popping up here. But I had some images from the kickoff town hall that I mentioned. This is a list of couple programs and initiatives that the Institute is spearheading and doing and really like collaboration with a coalition of different organizations and stakeholders in Newark. We have monthly meetings and regular convenings with this group to plan out different initiatives. And this is a few of the things we have going on right now. So I already told you a little bit about the kickoff town hall that happened on February 1st. Following that town hall, what we now have is an event series called the Vote 16 Brick City Ward Tour, where the goal is to have kind of fun, smaller, more intimate events in the different neighborhoods and wards around the city, so that we're making sure that this information is touching every part of the city and getting into people's hands, right? And so at these events, whether they're in a community center, a coffee shop, a church, or anything like that, people are able to connect with others in their community, and they're able to get info about the election, the Board of Ed, and most importantly, they're able to register to vote there. And so we're partnering with some folks to have these events. We're hoping to have 1 to 2 in each of the city's 5 wards. So you can find info about that on our website as well. We have resources and pretty much anything that you would need to put on these events available to be sent to your organization. So we are looking for additional partners, right? We have I'm not going to go through it on this call just to save time, but we do have a few things that we can share with you, including a sign-up form and a guide of what you would be expected to do as an organization who wants to host one of these events. But the Institute will be able to provide you with like a robust number of resources to make this an easier lift. And so this is part of our kind of outside the schools, in the community approach to this effort, but we also then have an in the school approach too, right? So these other programs, which I'm really excited, really proud about, we have first a youth ambassador program where we are recruiting high school students from each of the city's high schools, the public schools as well as the charter schools. We have some participants. And what we did is in late January, we actually had 3 online workshops, 3 trainings where we took young people, students through basically everything that they needed to know about this initiative, about this election. And so that they had the tools that they needed to then organize their own peers, right? Of course, it's gonna take really like an army of supporters, of volunteers, allies, to get this job done of having young people register and vote at really high numbers. But we know that this work is going to be most impactful, most effective when it's led by young people. On the one hand, you're much more likely to be receptive to information, right? Want to participate in something if a friend or, a family member is the one that's inviting you, right, to get involved with that. And so we think young people need to be at the head of these conversations. But we also, as I mentioned before, we want to support our young people to be leaders in the long term, right? We want them to have the experience of talking about why voting is important, what issues matter to them, putting on their own voter registration drives in school, putting on their own kind of mock debates or candidate forums. So these are all things that we're working with high school students in the city right now to do. And this program is still open. We're still recruiting ambassadors. So if you know any, we would definitely appreciate the recommendation and getting them signed up and part of this. Again, we really are just trying to be a supporting force. We're not, they have the ability to kind of lead and do what they want in their schools. We're really just providing them with like templates, toolkits, and the materials or resources that they need to do that. Similarly, we also think that we can't ignore educators, right, in this process, right? These are trusted messengers that are in the schools every single day alongside these students, right? And so we also launched what's called the Teacher Champion Program to provide resources to educators to do similar things, to host voter registration drives in their classrooms or after school programs, to teach civic education lessons in their school and help their students register to vote. So similarly, looking for other people, other educators to be part of that. And so those are really the main 4 initiatives. The voter registration effort is, kind of encompassed in all of these different programs and events. But there are, I guess, here and there, we are working with certain groups, certain college students to train them to also be able to go into the schools, give presentations, host assemblies, and again, just be a resource to these schools, many of which, we hear from the principals and the teachers that they want this kind of programming. They've just maybe don't have the capacity to do it. And so we're trying to connect them with different organizations and people who wanna do that. Now, finally, the last thing we have on here is GOTV, which stands for Get Out the Vote and Mobilization. We want to make sure that people actually get to the polls, right, and vote. And so we're going to have a few events to that effect. Number 1, we are going to be doing some canvassing door to door, actually going on weekends door to door to the homes of registered voters, specifically young registered voters, to give them a reminder, hey, the election's coming up, do you have a plan to vote? Do you have any questions? All those kinds of things. So we're going to be going door to door, but we're also going to be making phone calls and sending text, right? And then finally, we're going to have on probably April 12th, which is the last weekend before the April 15th election. That's a Saturday, April 12th. We're probably going to have some sort of festival or block party. We're still working out the details, but we want this to be kind of like a mobilization, exciting, rallying event right before the election so that people, again, get that final reminder. They're hopefully energized and motivated to go to the polls and cast their vote. Okay, so hopefully you're hearing all of that and you're wondering, oh my God, that sounds good. How can I help? How can I support? And so there are many ways. Number 1, if you just want to be part of the overall Vote 16 campaign that's happening across the state, you can go to our website, njsj.org/vote16. We have a volunteer sign-up form. You can also scan this QR code. It'll take you right there. And if you fill that out, we'll connect with you and get you plugged in. As I mentioned, we have a coalition that meets monthly, but we also have a few subcommittees in that coalition. And so there's different ways to get activated and help with this effort. But more specifically, if you want to support in Newark, the big things that you can help do And one of the key roles you can play, either as, you know, whatever you are, a parent, a teacher, just a community leader, you really can play a critical role in making sure that young people know about this, right? If you're someone who has access to, or you work with young people on the day-to-day, please spread the word, right? Make sure that they get this information, because they might not be getting it anywhere else. And help them, you know, encourage them to ask questions, remind them about the deadlines, right? Help them register to vote, all those kinds of things. I think we can all do. The second thing is, again, if you're interested in working with us to host an event in your ward, your community, your neighborhood, you know, wherever you may have a base of people that you are connected with, right? We would love to invite you to become a partner in the Brick City Ward Tour, and we'll share after the call. Make sure everybody has like links and sign up information, all the things that you'll need. And then finally, you know, as I mentioned before, with the Teacher Champion program, the Youth Ambassador program, we are still trying to recruit more people to be part of this effort and connect them with these tools and resources. So if you have a contact in any of the high schools, we would really appreciate any recommendations that you could give to us, and help us get plugged in with these folks. We have a number of resources that I'll be able to share after this that, you know, make it really clear how you can support, how you can plug in. As I mentioned before, you can go to our website, and that'll be a place where you can find stuff. But we also have a Google Doc that really has, you know, just a list of all types of resources. So around voter registration, or just voter information, fact sheets and handouts. We have information in there around planning events. We have social media info, all types of things. And so we're building more out and adding to that. If there's ever anything that you think is helpful, you can request it. We're happy to add it. We also have materials for any events, or, you know, and, you know, if you are someone who has like a hub where you can just like put some things out to display, we have action kits, and so inside of these action kits we have voter registration forms, we have fact sheets, we can also give you some like swag, wristbands, buttons, those types of things, so you can directly request these and we'll send these materials to you. Also all these other resources that I kind of already talked about. So all of this is available, and, you know, we'd love to provide it with you, to share it with you, or help you get it out to other people in the community. All right, so I'll pause there and open it up for questions. I know there's some popping up in the chat, so let me try to look at those.
Yeah, there was one, well, someone requested that the form, and I believe this is the voter registration form for 16 and 17-year-olds to be sent in, but we can make sure to send that afterwards, as well as like all the other resources that you already mentioned, and the recording for this event, as well as the slide, so that you can look forward to that like after this.
Yeah, we'll definitely get that out to you.
And
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna read out the other question I was sent in, because I know, I think this was sent in during the part where you were talking about the students that you were already working with who are actively engaged. And so this question is, how do we engage the students who are not, or who feel disconnected from the political process or may feel disillusioned by it?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Great question. I'll do my best to answer it. Of course, I don't have all of the answers, right? If we did, we would have solved all the crises with democracy. But, you know, the best that I can offer is, and what I've seen work best for me, in my experiences with young people, but also other people, adults who may not vote for whatever reason, who feel disconnected from the political process, is to try to meet them where they are, right? And try to make it personal. I think a lot of times, many times, people are, they just don't know, right? A lot of people don't even know what their government does, whether it's at the federal level, sure, but even at their most local level, like they don't know what their mayor and their city council do. They don't know about their school board. Sometimes people don't know that state slaters even exist, right? And so on the one hand, I think that that's part of the disconnect is not understanding how important these different bodies are and like the services that they carry out and what your personal stake is in that, right? Like how do those issues affect you, right? So I think making it personal is you know, an important piece, but also I think reiterating to people that voting, while it's very important and like it is one of the most foundational rights that we have, you know, that uphold all our other rights, it's not the only way to be politically engaged and to be active, right? There's a number of ways that people can be part of their community, be active in it, be civically engaged, and I think it's important to encourage those forms as well because sometimes that's where people start, right? And so they may start by you know, just looking up some information, doing some research, for example, on their town government, start going to meetings, or you know, being connected with an organization in their town, connecting with neighbors on an issue that's affecting them, and really using that as an entryway into getting involved. So I think we should also encourage you know, different avenues for participation that, you know, can be fun, that can be exciting, can you know, really be personal to that individual's life and experience.
Okay. And sticking also in to the chat, it's there was a new question that was just sent in. So which municipalities have passed vote 16 and which towns are pending, or how can we push for them to pass it?
Yeah. So as of right now, Newark is the only city that has passed the vote 16 ordinance. There is interest from a couple other cities, a couple other towns around the state. Um, in no particular order. That includes places like Jersey City, which we expect to hopefully be one of the next places to introduce an ordinance. So Jersey City, places like Montclair, the Brunswicks, New Brunswick, East Brunswick. There's some interest there. There's some interest in the Oranges, Neptune, Asbury Park, Atlantic City. And Atlantic City actually late 2024, the council president there introduced an ordinance to lower the voting age. They did not have a hearing on it, and so it did not get passed. But I believe he's planning to reintroduce that ordinance, right? And so in terms of like what we can be doing to push them to pass it, you know, I think it's using all of our organizing and advocacy tools that we may use for something else, right? So reaching out to your council people, right, your council members, whether that's by email, you know, phone, trying to have an in-person meeting with them. These are all things that we encourage, and we actually have like some resources for you if you're interested in doing this. So we have talking points, right? We have templates, handouts, and we also, you know, we have an attorney on staff who is able to meet with like city councils, or city lawyers, I should say, city attorneys, because oftentimes what we've seen is that the council members will refer it to their legal department, and so that's really like the next step is then working with the city attorneys to make sure that, you know, everything's above board. We have a template ordinance that can be shared and used by some of these towns as well. So, you know, just I think connecting with your council people is the one big thing, but then also showing up in person at these council meetings to testify in support of it, right? Get it on the agenda. For the elected officials, but also for any community members who may tune into those meetings, right? And listen in. So those are the advocacy pieces, but what may come before that is like some of the organizing work, right? So connecting actually with young people in your town that you think support this, right? Hopefully they support it. Sometimes they don't. But connecting with them and getting them involved and you know, ideally letting them lead or at least have a very large part in making that happen in their town, right? So that can look like anything like tabling at events, hosting workshops and town meetings to discuss it and dive into it, answer questions. It could look like hosting a rally or some sort of event like that to really get a lot of people out. Collecting petition signatures. They're using social media. There's really so many different avenues that you can take. And I will say one of the things that the Institute is going to be working on over the next year is basically kind of like a playbook, a guide, if you will, for people in other towns who want to do what Newark did, to basically have like our playbook, what we did, and have all these resources in one place. And so, that will be coming out probably later this year, and hopefully that'll be helpful.
That's amazing. We did have one last question, but I feel like you sort of answered it. That question was, how can individuals and organizations outside of Newark support Vote 16, and help raise awareness about youth civic engagement in their own communities? And I feel like that was very much answered already, which is great. Okay. So I think that was all the questions that we had. I don't know, Asata, if you have any upcoming events that you want to uplift. I know we have two, but if you have some, please feel free to share.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in the Brick City Ward Tour, there's gonna be a series of events, so I'll let you and Maria talk about that in a second. But if you're in the city of Newark, there's also on March 22nd going to be a Youth Power Action Festival. And so this is going to be another one of those kind of like large scale mobilization events where we're trying to get as many young people as possible to come together, not only around this election, but just in general around the power that youth can have in building this future, but also in the right now. And there's going to be a lot of like creative and art components to this day. I think there's going to be some poetry reads, some art exhibits. And then the day is actually going to culminate with a youth-led candidate forum for the school board. So kind of a two-part day. That's going to be March 22nd, and I can share some information in the follow-up email with Sarai so that you guys all have that. But please save the date and be there if you can.
Yeah, that's awesome. We can for sure send that out afterwards. And I know for us on our end, sorry, we have two events coming up. The first one is our annual land assembly, which is taking place on Saturday, March 1st at Rutgers University in New Brunswick. And the land assembly is basically going to feature a whole lot of different breakout sessions, some on civic engagement and voting rights, others on immigration, affordable housing, healthcare access, and so many more. It's a good event to also come and network and connect with other Latino community organizers and members of the community. And I believe they will be closing out with a gubernatorial panel, if I'm not mistaken. So that's on Saturday, March 1st in Rutgers University, and I can send that in the chat or afterwards. Oh, I see it was already put in the chat. Thank you. And then the second one is part of the Brick City World Tour, and I'm gonna let Maria Andrade speak on that a little bit.
Thank you so much. Saludos, everyone. So if you're here, please save the date because we have a very interesting and hopefully a great turnout. We're getting so much feedback. On Saturday, March 8th, we are going to host one of the Vote 16 events where we are inviting all of our students to come in and learn about voter education. And we're going to launch the campaign on pledging them to get them to vote and bring a friend. And then we're calling this event Votamos Juntos at 16. So I'm dropping off the information in the chat. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out to any one of us and I will see you guys there. It's from 2 to 4 and I'm typing the information right now.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, and I think that is it. I believe yeah, the final question was answered. Awesome.
Yes. Yeah, that's it for me. Again, thank you all so much for your time. I really appreciate you being on this call. And thank you for the opportunity. So I have my contact information up here, so you can reach out if you have any questions or you want to connect on anything we discuss. So thank you.
And again, we'll be sending everything out afterwards, the recording, the slide deck, all these resources that we spoke about, and the events coming up. So if you didn't get any of that down, don't worry, we will be sending it afterwards. But thank you again, everybody, for joining us. And yeah, have a great rest of your day. Thank you again, Asata. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye, everybody.